biggest deal that I did was I was speaking to an elderly lady who said that, she had a piece of land that she was looking to sell, and that her niece or her cousin would get in contact with me because that relative was a broker. So the lady contacted me. We're kind of talking. In this situation, I kind of avoided giving her my offer for whatever reason, because I really wanted to see if she would give me her number that they wanted to sell for. And thankfully I did that, because the number that she gave me was way lower than my lower end offer. She's telling me that on the phone, and I already know what I can sell this for, $175,000. Their starting offer that they told me was $95,000.
Welcome to the Vision Dev podcast, where entrepreneurs, innovators, and creators come to us to not only share their stories, but also their mindset, the strategies, and the tools behind their great accomplishments. Hi, my name is Leo Brunette. I'm the co-founder of Vision Dev, our private equity real estate investment firm. And on the path of building our dream real estate portfolio, I interview guests that are entrepreneur, innovators, or creators to learn about their own path and learn about the tricks and tips that they've learned throughout that journey to see if it couldn't apply to our own business. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Emanuel Elmaleh, an old friend, a former business partner when we were in university, a boxing beast, and an emerging wholesaling legend in the US market with multiple transactions of over 6 digits under his belt already. In this wide-ranging conversation, we learned some great lessons Emanuel learned while managing upwards of 800 apartments during his time with a well-known public REIT or during his tenure as a student painting franchisee. Emanuel is a guy I totally admire and that I envy for his strong work ethic and his can-do attitude. You're not going to want to miss this one. Emanuel, we're getting you on a podcast for the first time.
Amazing.
That's great. Somebody's going to finally hear about all the amazing things you do.
Exactly.
We've known each other for a very long time. We've been in business together.
That's right.
But we never sat in front of mics and had a recorded discussion before.
Exactly.
So glad we do this.
We've done a lot of discussions, but minus the microphones and the cameras
recording.
And everything.
It was time we put this out in the public.
Exactly.
I think it's great that you're coming on the podcast because I'd love to share with everyone what you're doing now. It's pretty exciting. You're dealing with different country, and you're doing some pretty interesting deals right now in the US. Would you like to start off this conversation with, the greatest deal you've done so far in this wholesaling business of yours?
Sure. So maybe I can just explain a little bit what I do so that it kind of makes the story a little bit, make a bit more sense. So essentially, I operate in the States, like you mentioned, specifically in Charlotte, North Carolina. And what I do is I contact owners of vacant lands to see if they're interested in selling. So these are specifically lots that are not on market. Okay, these are people that just own vacant pieces of land, or they might have inherited them. And it's a lot of cold calling, it's a lot of cold texting, a lot of cold outreach. And basically just seeing if, these people have any interest in selling. Out of 100 people that I speak to, there's probably 98 that'll tell me no. And sometimes there's 2 that'll be like, you know what? I just, I either lost my job, or I have this big expense I have to cover, or I inherited this land and I don't really know what to do with it. So, 2 out of the 100 might show some interest in wanting to sell their land. And then that's really when I come in and, speak to them, give them an offer to close relatively quickly. We sign a contract, and then I essentially resell the contract or the right to purchase that lot to a builder or to an investor. And I make the difference in the spread. So that's called wholesaling. It's a very, very common practice in the US. It's very uncommon in Canada, mainly because of the privacy laws are way stricter here. So it's very hard to get, homeowners' phone number, email, contact information, all that. So, but in the US, everything is all public. You can go on a free website and get somebody's phone number in 2 seconds.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, that whole process is called wholesaling. But yeah, I mean, the biggest deal that I did was over the summer, closed in September. I was speaking to an elderly lady who said that, she had a piece of land that she was looking to sell, and that her niece or her cousin would get in contact with me because that relative was a broker. So the lady contacted me. We're kind of talking, and she was saying like, yeah, we're kind of thinking about it, but it didn't really seem like there was any rush. She said, look, if you're wanting to put an offer in, or let me know what you guys could pay, like, I'm more than happy to. And I'd already done my due diligence on it. I'd already done my research, so I already knew my number in mind, right? So, I mean, you know what it is. You always want to start on the lower end and then kind of work your way up. So I already had a number in mind that was on the lower end. And normally when people ask, I'll give them my offer, right? Because I always start super low. And if they're very insulted, well, they'll tell me they're insulted, and then I can kind of adjust. But for some reason, in this situation, I kind of avoided giving her my offer for whatever reason, because I really wanted to see if she would give me her number that they wanted to sell for. And thankfully I did that, because the number that she gave me was way lower than my lower end offer.
Wow.
Yeah. So she's telling me that on the phone, and I already know what I can sell this for. I had already spoken to one of the builders that I work very closely with. I had sent him the property. He took a look. We basically had like a negotiated, verbal offer for me to sell it to him at. And she told me on the phone their number, which was like I said, much lower than what I was gonna start off with. So you can imagine me on the phone. I'm like almost blocking my mouth to not sound too excited. So I was like, yeah, kind of makes sense. But do you think we can go like a little bit lower than that? Of course, you have to come back with something a bit lower, because if you're gonna,
If you just take the price, it will look unrealistic.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So I had to push a little bit more. She's like, yeah, I think we can work with that price. So I said, okay, perfect. So, just to put in context, I can put some numbers. I don't mind. So essentially, the lot I was able to resell for 175,000. My starting offer was going to be 130,000. So I had still a significant spread. Their starting offer that they told me was 95,000.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, and then I negotiated down to 90,000.
Good
So
for you.
you could do the math, and that was a pretty nice spread. We're talking in US dollars, right? So that makes it even nicer. So we basically had everything all verbally accepted and whatnot. And I mean, she's a realtor, so if she's giving me her verbal, I don't take it that it's guaranteed, but it's pretty reliable. So then we just had to get down to the kind of the details, which are like the deposit, the refundable deposit, the non-refundable deposit, the closing time frame, all that type of stuff. And they wanted a pretty significant non-refundable deposit up front.
From the start.
From the start, yeah, which is pretty standard, especially if you're working with a realtor, because that's how it works, especially for the lots that are on market.
Right?
And it's land, exactly. So I told because it was my buyer. The beauty of what I do is I don't have to put any money. I have virtually no money at risk, because even the deposits,
Your buyer takes
it's my
care of
buyer
it.
that takes care of that. Yeah. And I don't have to put up the money up front to purchase the property. It's like all coming from the buyer's side. So we were just discussing the details, and they wanted, I think it was like 5,000 non-refundable, which is still pretty high, but given the situation, it wasn't unreasonable. So my buyer, and I remember this was on a Thursday, okay? So my buyer wanted to confirm the utilities, so wanted to confirm that there was water and sewer that were provided by the city. And when I called the city, they said that the guy who's in charge of confirming this was out for the day and would be back tomorrow. So I'm like, okay, so I'll call back tomorrow. So I called back Friday morning. Nobody was answering. Called, because I said I wanted to get this locked in right away. I wanted to get this under contract right away, because I felt like if it went the weekend, something would have, cracked.
Yeah.
So I'm like really, really pushing to get this guy on the phone. He's not answering, keeps on going to voicemail. So I had contacted this guy that I had met the first, the time that I went to Charlotte, and I said, "Look, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to drive to this office." It was like an hour away from where he was, so it was like an hour there, an hour back. So I said, "I need you to drive to this office to confirm with this guy that there's water and sewer. I know that there is, but I just need confirmation because that's what my buyer needed." So he's like, "Oh, it's like far. This and that." I'm like, "Just please, I'll take care of you." Okay, no problem. So he goes there, he drives, he gets to the office. The office is like closed. So I'm like, okay, now it's a little bit, now it's cutting it a little bit tight. So he found some lady that worked like the receptionist or something, and he got her to like just write down on a paper, "I confirm from the city of blah 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 that there is a water and sewer." So he sent that to me. I sent it to my buyer. He's like, "No, I really need like the map." So I'm like, okay, so I guess this is gonna go till Monday, but I had like a bit of a bad feeling. So then the broker was like, "Okay, what's going on? Are you ready to sign the contract, get the deposit, this and that?" I said, "Yeah, like just give me until Monday morning. I just need to like triple check that the utilities are there." She was like, "All right." So that was Friday. Woke up Saturday morning, had like a weird feeling. I checked my phone and I had a text from the realtor saying, my client doesn't want to wait that long. And remember, like at the beginning when I was talking to them a week ago, they sounded very like nonchalant about it. Like, "Oh, we're not sure if we're gonna sell," not like super not rushed. She's like, my seller didn't want to wait till Monday, so I've listed the property on the market. Now, this is terrible for me because they listed it at the initial price, which was the 90 or 95,000. And if any other investors see it, they're going to know that this is like a ridiculous deal. So she sent me this. I'm freaking out because I'm like, that's it. Like the deal's done. This was like a massive deal. So I told that to my buyers, like, okay, just do whatever it takes to like get this thing locked up. So essentially, I had to send in an offer that day or on the Sunday, to get this locked up. But then I was in the dilemma of, okay, do I just give a way higher offer than what I had given initially? But the downfall with that is that if she's like, okay, why is he offering me so much more than before? Is there something that like I'm not seeing? I'm not talking about like a $5,000 or $10,000 higher offer, like 25,000 more than what I had given. Or do I say like, okay, I'll offer like 5 or 10,000 more, but then somebody else is going to come and outbid me. So I went with the first option, which was just give a way higher offer, hoping that she wasn't going to like catch on to something, that this thing could be sold for way more. The value of it was way more than that listed. So I had given the offer of 125,000 from 90,000, so
Ouch.
35,000 more. Yeah, which is basically out of my pocket, right? Um, and she accepted. So we got her under contract. I think it was on Sunday afternoon. And then she had messaged me back on Sunday evening saying, "You're lucky that you moved fast because we already had like an offer that was like 20,000 more than what you had given, but we're already locked up." So yeah, that's how that deal went. So in the end, it was
closing.
Yeah, after that, everything was smooth. Yeah.
And your buyer closed what, 30 days later?
Yeah, about 45 days later. Yeah. So that was
wow, that was a close call.
that was a very, very close call. And
you still had a delta of like 50 grand on this.
that's it, exactly.
Congrats.
Yeah, yeah.
How did
So
you celebrate?
obviously, sorry.
How did you celebrate?
How did I celebrate? Like I think I went out for dinner that night, but I try not to celebrate too hard, because what I found is that I get very excited over deals, but that means that I'll get very, very on a high. And if something goes wrong, which I've had deals fall through at the last minute that I thought I was going to make like 20 or 30,000 on them, then I get to a very, very low.
Well, yeah, you have to celebrate when it's done.
That's it, exactly.
When it went through.
Exactly.
Only then.
So, yeah, I mean, I think I just went for dinner and Yeah, tried to keep it
Nice.
as chill as possible. Because still, I mean, I know it's gonna sound weird. Obviously, it was, a massive amount, but in my head, I'm like, it could have been 85,000, right? So it's like I almost saw it as like a
Mm.
loss. So I have to, consciously be
Still
like,
be
okay, it's
grateful.
still, yeah, it's still a very,
Because
very
it's not
nice.
always such a nice spread.
Exactly.
You have to work, like you've been working very hard for 2 years
Yeah,
to get this opportunity,
exactly.
and it can pay off very quickly
Yeah,
when you get lucky. But you got in luck's way,
that's
right?
it.
And so congrats to you.
Yeah,
And we'll get to this business eventually. I'd like to understand it better.
yeah,
But putting the deal under contract, that's the lesson here. Like,
that's it.
that's something we've learned very early in our business as well. Like, if you see a good opportunity, your first job is to
Yeah,
put it under
that's
contract,
it.
not dig deeper, not
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
investors,
yeah,
not make sure you're not wasting your time. Just put it
exactly.
under contract.
Exactly.
Like, that's the first thing. And well, you almost did,
Yeah.
and that's the key.
Yeah, it's like, because then obviously I reflected and I said, okay, what did I learn? What could I have done better? What could have gone, more wrong? So the first thing I could have done was fronted the deposit myself,
Hmm.
right? But hindsight is obviously 2020. I think this was in the summer, so it's probably around July. It closed in September, but the beginning of the contract was
Yeah.
around July. So, this was still only about 6-7 months into my real estate kind of journey. And 5 grand now for me, if I know that a deal is going to close, I put it 100%.
Hmm.
But when you're not 1,000%, it's still 5 grand,
Oh,
you
it
know?
hurts
Yeah, exactly. Like
losing
if it
that.
doesn't work, it hurts.
Yeah.
So if I knew then what I know now, obviously I would have done it. But
Hmm.
like I said, hindsight is 2020. So it's just a learning experience. And
Yeah.
those deals, it's not like they're once in a lifetime, right? The more experience you get, the more.
And a couple years down the road, it's gonna be $1 million
That's it,
deposit, and you're
exactly.
gonna put it
Exactly.
because you'll feel confident this
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And ironically, what happened afterwards was that realtor started, she saw everything was smooth, we're professional, everything closed on time. And she said, my client has more properties that she's looking to sell as well, more land. So
Nice.
it's a good connection that we have. And hopefully there's going to be more and bigger deals that are going to come through out of that.
That's great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah.
So I've known you with an entrepreneurial mind for the whole time I've known you, and
Mm-hmm.
I've known you for a bit now. And I'd be curious to know, like, when did you decide you'd become an entrepreneur one day? Like,
Yeah.
has it always been somewhere inside of you, or is it something you discovered later on?
So I don't think consciously I ever thought that. I don't think I ever labeled myself as an entrepreneur consciously, but I think that I always knew that I'd be working for myself. So I mean, in the end, it's kind of synonymous, but
Mm-hmm.
that's how I just viewed my life down the road. Um, yeah, I mean, there wasn't really like a turning point in my life where it's like, okay, I'm gonna become an entrepreneur. I'm gonna do this. It was just kind of always innate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously my father's an entrepreneur, my stepmom's an entrepreneur, my mom is a realtor. So I think I was more or less surrounded by that. Um, yeah, so I think just growing up, those kind of my mentality that I never thought I would spend the rest of my life working for someone. That being said, I always knew that until I got to a certain age, I wouldn't mind working for other people, for other companies,
Mm-hmm.
so I can learn cheaply. I can learn on their dime and get paid for it.
Yeah.
I can make
You get paid to
mistakes.
learn.
It costs them money. Obviously, I wasn't trying to make mistakes, but
Mm-hmm.
if those came about, um, and every job that I took it pretty seriously in the sense that yes, I was only an employee, but I it was almost like I viewed the company as my own. So every dollar that was spent, even though it was from a large corporation, it was
Mm-hmm.
like I was spending my own money. And I said, as long as I have this mentality, when it's time that it's actually going to be my own money, it's not going to be some big shock,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if I was kind of spending recklessly and I was just saying, oh, it's the company's money, it's not my money, I feel like you'd have a big mindset shock when it actually is your money. So Yeah, I think that's more or less that was more or less my mentality towards entrepreneurship.
So your business journey pretty much started with university?
Um, yeah, more or less. I
Yeah.
would say that's
Did you had any prior experience before university?
um no, I mean, was working jobs like at restaurants and stuff like that, like a
Okay.
typical, student, but
Yeah.
nothing no, I think the first experience was Scholars,
Yeah.
which
So
is
we
how
did
we met.
scholars
Yeah,
together,
exactly.
which was amazing. What did you gain from this experience? So Scholars is a student painting franchise.
Yeah,
So you would get coached to start your own student painting, residential painting franchise where you'd hire students to paint houses and
exactly.
sell contracts through winter to produce them in the summer, which many guests so far on this podcast have been through. I think it all changed us quite a bit and
Like
created a crazy
a million
network.
percent.
So I'd be curious to know about your take on
Yeah.
this.
So I really attribute everything, sounds weird to say all my success, but it's not like I have tons of success, but everything that I've been
Well,
successful
you're
at,
on the right path.
I think I'm on the right path, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that I've had so many successes up until now. I think I'm taking the right steps.
You're humble.
Thank you. But I think that everything, I think that Scholars has basically taught me everything that I know today. And whether it's in terms of, cold calling, networking, how to sell, how to deal with expectations, how to deal with clients, how to deal with, obviously disappointments or issues. All those things came from the experience that we had at Scholars.
What'd be your greatest lesson you took out of this, like concretely?
From the Scholars at Your Service, the greatest lesson, I don't know. I think it's just, I don't think failure is fatal, right? Like a job can go wrong. You can not get the sale. You can lose who you consider as your best employee. There can be, some sort of accident or whatnot. So I think in the moment, I think you're actually way more level-headed than I am. But I think in the moment, sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming. But if you take a step back and kind of look at it on a long term, it's like
Yeah.
nothing is really like, I failed at a lot of things. I'm sure you have as well. And it's like, we're still here today. Right. So when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, it's
That's a
annoying
great
to,
lesson.
yeah, it's annoying to not accomplish what you set out to, but it's never fatal.
Seeing failure as part of the process is key,
Exactly.
especially if you want to create your own path. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to make a whole bunch of
Yeah,
mistakes,
exactly.
and if it hurts you too much every time, it's not gonna be a fun
You're
journey,
you're
right?
you're not made for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we were partners
Yeah.
for a whole season.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
was great. And then after university, I think that's when you started your real estate journey. Right?
Correct. So I did 2 years as Scholars. Last year we partnered up together. Then I had graduated from university, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had kind of an idea that I wanted to be in real estate. So I got a job at a property management company. Actually, it's actually a real estate investment trust. So they own, I think, over 10,000 doors across Canada.
Yeah.
And
Very impressive.
yeah, it was a fantastic, fantastic time. I was there for almost 3 years. And it's funny because I almost look at that experience as kind of like an extension from my time at Scholars, because obviously everything we learned there, I applied it at this new job, at this new company. And it just really made me, propel and help me grow in all those aspects that we were learning about. So for example, hiring, dealing with clients, dealing with expectations and all that. Because for example, let's say we had anywhere from 5 to 15 employees when we were running our painting business. When I was at this property management company, I had probably 20 or 25 employees, right? So you're just dealing with the same things, but on a larger scale.
You were managing 900 units by the end?
Close, yeah, around 800.
800.
Yeah, across 15
Huge.
buildings. Yeah, so obviously had to deal with a lot of tenants, right? But at the same time, it was the same thing as dealing with our customers when we were doing the painting business, right?
Yeah.
You have some that are super nice, and you have
Expectation
some
management.
exactly. You have some that are fun to deal with. You have some that are just completely, irrational. So, I think if I didn't experience that at a smaller scale when we were running the painting company, I wouldn't have, been ready to do that on a larger scale. So I think, both of those experience went really well hand in hand. And on top of that, it's funny because when we're at Scholars, I think Nick was all of our mentors, right? Like we looked up to him, we still do today. And then when I went to
He's
work,
going to be on the podcast one
yeah,
day.
we have to get him on the podcast. You have to get him on the podcast. And then when I went to the real estate firm, my boss, my manager, her name is Jen. I had the exact same relationship that I had with Nick, right? So it extended beyond just a professional, a professional communication relationship. Like, I went to her for personal things that I was going through at that time, just like I went to Nick with personal things that I was going through at the time. And
That's
I
great
got
you
along.
had that.
Yeah, I got along super, super, super well with both of them, and I still keep in touch with her today and Nick as well. So it's yeah, I was very grateful for those opportunities.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anything like, since we're a real estate management company or investment company, I'd be curious to know anything in particular they were doing in the way they would manage their portfolio that stood out and that you kept. Not that you could compare with dozens of other companies like that, but I'd be curious if there's any key insights you kept from that experience.
I think something that they instilled in us, especially the property managers, was that if you could manage properties from a computer, there would be one person at their head office in Ottawa managing all the properties, right? The reason why they have multiple property managers in multiple cities is because it requires physical presence, right? You have to go to the buildings, you have to see what's going on, right? Yeah, you got to make sure that things are clean because yes, you have to rely on your
physical asset.
Exactly. You have to rely on your staff, you have to trust your staff, but at the same time you have to, keep them accountable for what they're doing as well, right? Just because they said that they cleaned the entrance in the winter, right? You got to go make sure it's really done. So specifically when it comes to property management, just the details of the cleanliness. For example, making sure that the grass was always nicely cut, or that the walkways were always salted and cleared of any snow. So those small things they really really drilled into us to make sure that we went physically to check to make sure that these things were done.
And it's a private company. They're profit driven. They're return driven. Even
They're actually a public company.
they're public.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're a REIT.
Okay. You're right. But still, they're return driven, and I'd be curious to understand what's their perspective on this. Where having the grass cut properly, and all these little details.
Yeah.
How do they see these things trickling down to the returns to their investors?
It's crazy because all those small details, they actually cost a lot of money. Making sure that we have new flowers every year. Again,
and I've seen their buildings.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
exactly.
They're very proud of their assets.
So you just said it. You see, you're a real estate investor. You saw their buildings. Maybe not now, but maybe a few years down the road, you're like, you know what? You can tell that this property has been well kept, that there's not going to be some hidden disasters. I may be interested in purchasing it. So it's not a hard return.
The flowers would not make a difference.
It's not
or how clean the lobby was 5 years ago.
Yeah. But it still sticks in your mind. So like I said, even if you don't have any, and I'm saying you, but investors in general, even if you don't have any interest in those properties now, you might down the road. And if you're looking at 5 different properties and 4 of them have, trash cans that are overflown, that are, falling over, doors that are off the hinge, grass that's overgrown, and then you have this one asset it's nicely maintained, that's going to be the one that sticks out. It was even things like making sure that the sign, like we had to do like night runs, so we had to go check all the buildings at night to make sure that the light bulbs were were on the timers properly, were not burnt. um it's like those small details that I think it's those things. It's like when you know, you know.
So it's like applying these standards on visual items like that will influence standards on things that you don't see in
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a way of making sure that everybody's on the same page in terms
Exactly.
of higher standards.
Yeah.
And I think it's inspiring, and it's
And
cool.
it also helps as well with when you're trying to rent apartments, right? If you walk into the two buildings, the first entrance you walk into, again, you have like trash on the floor. You have kids' finger marks on the elevator. You have flyers that are half hanging off, and then you go to another one that maybe is not perfect, but it's clean. You know, that one is going to stick more in your mind, even if the apartments themselves are the exact same, right? These small differences when you walk in, make sure that the scent air machines are working. That when you walk in, you have like that good odor. All these small details. I don't think one of them will make you rent an apartment or make you want to put an offer on the building, but altogether, I think they have a lot of value.
And a lot of a lot of the tenant experience is influenced by the co-living with other tenants. And how did you make sure that the standards would also be applied by the tenants themselves? How do you make sure that the overall they're the people living there,
Yeah.
and they can make it very nice, like they could make it not as great with smells and
Yeah.
not being careful, leaving stuff in the hallways. How did you make sure?
So it's impossible to make sure that everybody is going to respect the building as much as you do. But the fact that we kept things in a tidy, in a clean manner, or that the company enforces that onto the managers. If you're a tenant and you go to the garbage room and you have like you have a bag that's on the floor, you have another trash can that's like has like juice falling out of it, you're gonna have your bag. You're just gonna throw it like that. You're gonna say, it looks like crap. But if you go in, even
Like a
the
domino effect.
exactly, if even the trash room is nice, I'm not saying everybody, but you're gonna be more enticed to want to keep it that way. It's like it's still your home. It's still where you live. So
You don't want to look bad.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah. So unfortunately, that doesn't
so
happen.
it starts with the landlord.
Exactly.
And then it'll influence everybody.
Exactly.
Everything else.
But actually, it's a double-edged sword, because the funny opposite side of that is, if you run the buildings so well and keep them so clean, then it's almost like the tenants
they're expecting
their expectations are so high that it's like, okay, if whatever reason, like the gym room is closed for reparations or whatever it is, their expectations are so high that it's like, oh, okay, well, this is unacceptable. But then they come from buildings that are run down, that are dirty, but those are subconsciously, those are their expectations of the landlords. So they're not going to go to the landlord for small things like, oh, my closet handle is not working. So it's almost like they'll come over to those buildings, they'll see how well taken care of they are, and
they'll think that they're at the hotel.
that's it. Exactly. Then they almost expect too much. So there's kind of that middle ground that we have to
Did you find any solution to
it's
managing expectations properly?
I mean, I had to be hard on the staff, not hard in a bad way, but just make sure that they understand the expectations as well, right? So kind of try to prevent as much as you can, as opposed to having to fix it afterwards. So to give you an example, every single unit that a tenant moved out of, that we needed to do significant renovations as opposed to just painting and cleaning, I would walk every single unit. So I walked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units. And it was to the point of like, when you have the light switch, you have the plaque, making sure that the screws are aligned. You don't want to have one screw that's like this and another screw that's like that. It's such a minute detail that nobody's gonna realize.
But then you'd have to make a ticket to the
To the super.
super so that he aligns it, or you'll just take your knife out and.
Well, I mean, if I have the screwdriver, I'll do it myself. But at the same time, even if it's something that I can fix easily, I still want to give it to him
So that-
because he's going to be annoyed to do it. But you do that once or twice, now he's going to want to make sure that it's perfect before I walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I do that is because if I walk it and then the tenant comes in, and if the tenant sees, I mean, they're not going to see the screws, but for example, like the doorknobs, the knobs on the closet door, right? If those are not secured, then in their head, they're like, okay, if this is wrong, what else is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And then consciously they start looking for other things that are other faults in the apartment that are not crazy. But
Yeah.
it's like you almost don't want to leave them any room to think, okay, I have to look what else is not working.
Yeah. It's like first impression
Exactly.
makes the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Is that something you took from scholars? I remember how like I would be
Yes,
very picky
yes.
on the cleanliness
Yeah.
of the job sites.
Yeah.
Like you finish your day, even though you're coming back tomorrow, you clean everything, you
Exactly.
remove all your tools, and you make it like you
100%.
weren't there.
yeah,
And that's gonna like
because
the client's gonna see that, and he's
well,
not
that's
even
it.
gonna go check the job.
Exactly. Because if he sees, you leave it a mess, you have like paint drips here and there, they see that, then they're going to be like, okay, if they made it messy like here, they must have not done their lines properly. They must have dropped paint, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you really want to keep it, you really want to mitigate the possibility for the client or whoever you're dealing with to consciously be like, okay, if this is wrong, what else is potentially wrong?
Yeah. And the moment that becomes their perspective or
Yeah.
that their angle on your work,
You're starting on at a deficit.
they're gonna find everything. It's so you want to make sure the angle is right.
Exactly.
So customer relationship is
Like
it's quite an art.
I've dealt with tenants moving in that the apartment was perfect or as close to perfect, as it could be. Again, we're talking about buildings that some of them were built in 1970s. Others, I had one that was built in early 1900. They're not going to be new construction, so you have to accept what you're going to get. But given what we have, we really try to make it the best that we can. So I remember, like, I had tenants that would come in and they would basically have a new stove or like almost new, not with the coils, just like the flat stove. And there was like a small scratch that had zero effect on the usability of it. And they had nothing to complain about. So they complain about a small scratch on the stove. Whereas they're coming from apartments. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them. And I'm saying this because I have went to other property to other real estate companies that own buildings. And I've done tours of the apartments pretending like I'm a tenant. It's called a comp shop. And you see what they're presenting, and it's like, wow, this is like nothing compared to us. So then you have these, you have some tenants that come in and they want to complain about something, they can't find anything, so they're really going to complain about the most minute thing.
And I know it's to the audience. Maybe other real estate investors will find that interesting, but lots of people might think like, are gonna stop talking about screws, but it's all about setting standards.
100%.
And right away, it makes me think of the restaurant business, and that business is just all about these little details. And I'm I really admire high-end restaurants for keeping standards for 10, 15, 20 years. They keep the standards. You look at restaurants in Montreal like L'Express, they've been around for how long? And they just kept these standards for all these years. And how do you in those 3 years, maybe it wasn't long enough for you to get to this point, but how do you not fall into the micromanagement trap at some point? And how do you make sure these standards stick? So you were mentioning the example of just, bringing the guy back, if even for a small detail, so that he's annoyed and he'll make sure
knows
that
for the
he
next
doesn't
time.
have to, you don't have to do this every time. Any other thing you've figured out that could help with setting the standard without you having to check everything?
So not really, because I have to say that, not that I'm a micromanager, but it's hard for me to, so put it this way. if I say something is good, if I say something is acceptable, it's a reflection of me, right? Even though I'm not the one that was painting the house, or I'm not the one that was renovating the apartment, or I'm not the one that was cleaning the lobby, if I sign off on it, it's basically me.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't micromanage in the sense that, it's like, okay, what are you doing this minute? What are you doing the next minute? But I would physically go check myself, maybe not 100%, but a very, very, very high percentage of, like, the units, the lobbies, the garages, the garbage rooms, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that in a good way, because I think that I could have, or that I have to learn, in a sense,
To trust
to,
your
to, to
team.
trust a little bit more. But it's probably more of like a pride or ego thing, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, if I sign off on it,
Yeah.
it's a complete reflection of myself and my standards, and you know my abilities, in a sense. So I think, yeah, I have a bit of trouble of letting go and delegating,
But I'm
responsibilities.
sure you might have found ways to get better at it, because that's the goal in the end. Like
Hmm.
the real goal is to show up in one of the units and it's perfect, and you
Exactly.
didn't have to check all 15
Yeah.
before that, and now you succeeded at setting a standard.
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
Hmm.
And chapeau to people that can own 5 restaurants across the world that all have those
The
standards,
exact same standards.
and they can't check them all at the
Yeah.
same time, but they still manage to delegate that standard, or like. And I'm curious to see how you figured out to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, trusting your staff and trusting
Mhm.
your training and management of your staff as well. And yeah, I think it's really just a matter of that.
You've something I always admired about you is your work ethic. Like you're very dutiful,
Dutiful.
dutiful. Duty is important to you, and
Uh-huh.
like we can trust you with anything. When you said you would do it, like it's an where does that come from, and how do you maintain that in you? Is
Hmm.
it something natural, or
First of all, thank you for that. That's very, very kind, for you to say. But I think it kind of ties into what I just said, in terms of, it's like, if I sign off on something, if I say I'm going to do something, then it's a direct reflection of me,
Mhm.
even if it's not me physically doing whatever the task is, even if it involves me hiring somebody, or contracting somebody to do it. If I say I'm going to do it, I take it on my own shoulders.
Mhm.
So I think it's probably just more innate. Like I said, it has to do probably with pride and ego, in a sense that it's like, if I say it's good, then I really want it to be at a high standard. So I think, yeah, I think it probably has to do with that.
What got you into starting your first real estate business? Like,
That's a good question. I don't have, like, you know, there's not one event that really, triggered me saying, okay, I have to get into real estate, or I have to do this. But like like we spoke about at the beginning, I never thought that I'd be working for somebody else for the rest of my life. And I think I kind of just, fell into that. It was a friend that explained to me, or presented to me, to that world of real estate in the US,
mhm.
because, like, we don't have wholesaling, that concept, in Canada. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, you can do it, but it's extremely rare and extremely difficult.
Mhm.
So I think I was at a point in my life where I said, I think I gathered enough experience, enough knowledge, to finally be able to go off on my own and do something. And my friend was talking to me about, this whole concept of wholesaling in the US. So I looked into it and I said, you know what, seems pretty cool. Seems like you can make some good money out of it. It's in real estate, so it's already in a field that I'm aware of, I'm
Mhm.
familiar with. And I just kind of gave it a shot. You know, I was working 2 jobs, 2 full-time jobs, actually, at that point that I started. So I was working for my father in real estate, and I was also working at a nightclub. So I had pretty crazy hours. Um, I had I had a 9 to 5 working at the office, and then I had a 9 to 5 working at the nightclub, but it was the opposite. It was 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. So I did that for probably about a year and a half. And at the same time, I said, okay, you know what? With whatever free time that I have, let me try to get this wholesaling thing, up and running off the ground.
You had free time?
I had some free time. I didn't have much sleep. Yeah.
Crazy.
So my whole plan was, I said, you know what? I'm really just gonna put the pedal to the metal and push as hard as I can. The second that I get my first deal, close on it, and essentially prove to myself that this thing actually works, then I'm gonna leave the 2 other jobs and just jump into this thing full time. And that's what I did in October 2023. I closed my first deal, quit my 2 jobs, jumped in full force, and it was my last actual year of wholesaling last year, 2024. And
Nice.
thankfully, it was
And
a good year.
There's been multiple more since.
Exactly. There's been multiple more since. But it's fun, but it's stressful. It's scary at the same time, because up until that point, no matter what I was doing, there was always like, there was always somebody that I can go to in terms of like, okay, what can I do now? What's there to do next? But this is really the first time in my life that it's like me who has to tell myself what to do next. And there isn't like a roadmap or a blueprint of like, okay, you do 1, then you do 2, then you do 3. It's like you kind of you have to figure it out on your own.
So right away you started in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Why did you start there?
Complete random selection. I went on Google, I typed in like best 5 states to do wholesaling in. I think first one was Florida, second one was Texas, third one was Arizona. So I said, I'm not going to do the top 3, they're too competitive. And then the fourth one was North Carolina. I said, oh, okay, perfect. North Carolina should be easy. It's pretty wrong. It's still highly competitive there, but yeah, I honestly didn't put much thought into it, because I said it's one of those things, you have 50 states. So it's one of those things that you can get so
Decision fatigue.
Exactly. Like you can get so bogged down by that, like, okay, but this state has this many people and has had this much migration and this and this and that if I was just focused on that, I'd still be choosing a market right now. So I said, let me put as least amount of time as possible into choosing a market.
So you've put the map on your wall,
Basically, exactly. I just threw it.
Just threw the eyes
Exactly.
closed.
Yeah. Landed in North Carolina, which actually is pretty good because it's not too far away from Montreal. It's
Same
like
time zone.
Yeah, same time zone. It's only a 3-hour flight. So
it's 3 hours?
Yeah.
Only?
The flight, yeah. Yeah. So there wasn't really much thought into that. And I told myself, I said, okay, I'm going to give myself 6 months of really like working that market. And if nothing evolves, if nothing materializes, then I'll choose another market. But there's a lot of people that start it, and after 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, they're like, oh, I haven't got my first deal yet, this thing doesn't work, and I have to change markets. So if you keep on switching like that, you're never gonna get a deal. You might get lucky, but for 90% of the people, it's like you really have to stick to it. And for everybody that I was speaking to that has been doing it or that was getting into it, they said like it takes time to get your first one, but once you get your
Why
first
does
one,
it take time? Because there's no such thing as beginner's luck in that game?
No,
or?
so there's definitely such thing as beginner's luck, which was also the frustrating part, because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups that is specifically wholesaling, or for example like Pace Morby or Jerry Norton. So those guys are they have huge communities, and every day I was getting notifications like started wholesaling 3 weeks ago, got my first deal, got my first check, $10,000, $5,000, $15,000. And, and these are people that, not to my own horn, but, don't come from the same background, don't have the same type of education. And they're still like getting deals within their first month. But I think that there's so many others that don't, that you just, you don't realize the ratio.
Yeah.
Of these people, of how small, what small
And
fraction.
it's a numbers game. I don't think
exactly
when it comes to the calling, your leads, it doesn't take that level of sophistication.
Exactly.
You just need to hit hit the
Exactly.
phone
Exactly.
and find the person that's
100%.
at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And is following up and building some sort of a rapport over time
Mm-hmm.
with these client also play in this like play a
It's
role.
it's like the most important thing.
So
And
when they spoke to you a few times and timing comes,
that's it. Exactly.
they're gonna call you, or when you
Exactly.
call, it's gonna be
Yeah.
the right time. So it's
Exactly.
important to have a database and follow up. And
100%. Like just to give you an example,
we did a bit of that in Scholars.
just a little bit, just a bit of following up and a bit of cold call and a bit of knocking on doors when it's minus 15 outside and
Yeah.
getting doors slammed in our face. Yeah, rings a bell.
North Carolina's warmer.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. I have people texting me saying like, I saw something saying, I saw a post on Facebook where like I said, oh, I couldn't close on the deal this week because the registry of deeds where they record all the deeds is closed due to weather. So I'm like, due to weather. I looked on it. It's like -1 with like light snow. And
Really?
I sent him a picture of outside. It was like 2 feet of snow, like -50. And I'm like, you guys closed for that.
Snow's piling up by the window.
Exactly. Yeah. So when he told me that, I was laughing. I said, oh, okay. You guys don't know how good you have it in terms of weather. But just this past week or last week, knock on wood, but I signed 2 contracts. One of them, the first contact that I made with the seller was December 2023.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Following up pays off.
over a year. And that's,
Crazy.
I don't want to get into details, but that's a nice one. And we finally signed the contract, and I told a guy, like, the seller, I appreciate your trust. We're gonna get this done for you. And he literally said, you kept on following up like you said you would. You kept on calling back, sometimes a little bit too much, but that's fine. You kept on texting, and I told you when I was, because this was a title issue situation that he had to resolve, and he said, I told you that, when I was going to resolve this and you would be my guy. And we're a year later, and, you kept your word in terms of checking back in. So I'm keeping my word in terms of, because these guys, I wish I was the only person reaching out, but they're getting tens of calls per day, hundreds of calls a week.
Wow.
Yeah, like I'll cold call somebody for the first time. They pick up and they'll go, I told you guys yesterday to stop calling me. I'm like,
That wasn't me.
it wasn't me, but so I understand it's very frustrating for them.
That's crazy.
So, but all to say that this guy was probably getting called dozens and dozens of times. People probably throwing out offers left and right, probably higher than my offer even. But it goes back to having
So is
that.
this the case with every lead that you contact, that they're being contacted
Yep.
that often?
Yeah.
So how do you stand out?
So it's funny. I don't really know, but I do a lot of texting. I have a text blasting software, and I've had 2 or 3 people. One of them that I've already closed on a deal with him, that they told me straight out. They go, look, I get called dozens and dozens of times a week and texted, and they get sent a letter in the mail, postcards, offers in the mail, like
That's
every single
terrible.
way of getting contacted, they get contacted. And one of the guys literally said, I saw your text and I don't know what it was, but you sounded like a human over text. Because all these other texts is like, hi, my name is Emanuel from XYZ company. We are, local investors. We do this. It sounds too automated, but my texts are still automated, but I create them in a sense that it looks like I'm texting you like, hey, Leo, I saw you own this property down the road. Like, you have any plans for it? So it really sounds like I'm texting you. And I had several sellers tell me, like, I don't know what it was about your text or about your phone call or about your voicemail, but you just sounded like a regular person and you sounded like personable. So we decided to do business with you.
That's
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
You should take note of that.
Yeah. But it's scary sometimes to think how many people are contacting these sellers and reaching out. And like I said, sending mail and calling and texting and all that. But it's really just a numbers game at the end of the day. And I've had several deals where I've closed I've closed them, and they said, you just stood out. But I've had several other deals that I've lost to other people who probably just called them at the right moment. Like I've had people that I made contact with. They said they're not interested, and then I see like 6 to 8 weeks later, it's sold to a company. But it's timing.
We've seen that
Yeah,
before too.
exactly.
Timing is so crucial.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Weeks can make a difference.
Oh, it's insane. So that's why even people that say, not looking to sell right now, check back with them every 2 to 3 months just to see if
So
anything
is that
has
your
changed.
pace, 2-3 months?
Yeah.
And somebody tells you like, no, I'm not interested in selling. Like, you might sell in the next few months, or like, no, I'm not going to sell in the next years.
Mm-hmm.
You still like follow up with
Yep.
them because things change.
Things change. You have good things that change and bad things that change in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know when you're going to need, an extra inflow of cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things
Nice.
definitely change.
And does it make any difference that it's remote and that you're like 3-hour flight away from
Yeah.
there? Like what difference does it make to your business in general?
So, I mean, the biggest thing is that I would prefer to meet these people in person because, I mean, I think I sound pretty, personable on the phone and by text, but I think that I'm most comfortable in person,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I wish that we had the opportunity of doing that here, because every person that'd be like, I don't know, I'm thinking about it. Like, I would go see them right away in person and talk about everything but that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what we learned at Scholars, right? Like we go to quote a job, we're
Yeah.
sitting down to show them, and it's like the iPad is on the side. We're not
build a
even
relationship.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not to say that because I do that, I'm gonna close that deal that day.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe 6 months or a year down the road, when they're ready to sell, they remember me and not the 10 other people that just give them a phone call or a text like everybody else does. So I think that's the biggest difference.
Prends des notes, Gabriel. C'est du bon stock.
Yeah, but
Emmanuel, c'est un killer en vente.
Mais il fait du wholesaling, so.
Mais
but
c'est pas sa première.
it's sales also. It's sales, but it's like the reverse sales. Like you're like selling to buy, basically.
Selling to buy, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think again, not to to promote Scholars too much, but like all of these things I learned because of that. How to build rapport, how to build a
promote
relationship.
Hamza in Ontario.
Exactly.
In Ottawa.
Yeah, exactly.
He took over the
Sweet.
the franchising system.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
I hope he's still instilling the same.
He's a great leader.
Yeah, values and work ethic that we had from Nick. But I think that's probably the biggest difference. But at the same time, you have like the biggest people that are doing this in the US. They're doing this across several states. So in that regard, there's people that are making $1 million a month doing this. They obviously have a way larger operation, but they're doing that across several states. So when you look at it like that, there's not really any difference.
Doesn't seem to be a hindrance to growing the
exactly.
business.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that stands out is when I get people on the phone, they're like, your accent is like not from around here, because they have a little bit more of a southern accent. So that's
and like in general, does it play against you or for you? It doesn't make any difference to be from Canada?
I think it depends on the person. It depends on the. So funnily enough, one of the contracts that I just signed last week, I was talking to the guy, on text, and we were talking right before the holidays, and he's like, oh, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm gonna, right now I'm in Montreal with my family. We're gonna go on vacation. He goes, what do you mean you're in Montreal? I'm like, yeah, that's where I'm from. He's like, really? I go, yeah. He goes, I was born in Montreal. This is a guy from Charlotte.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, and up until that point, he was kind of like, he's kind of cold. Like he was super firm on his price. Like very like, it's my way or forget about it. And then we had kind of that rapport. And then all of a sudden he became like super chill, and we signed the contract like a week later.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I think in some cases it can help you, and in some cases, you might find somebody that's ultra patriotic that only wants to deal with Americans, and I mean it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So right now it's only you and software, or you have people working with
So I have two VAs. I just hired
Okay.
my second VA actually this week. So I have them doing more admin tasks and the cold calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they do the cold calling now.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
don't. It's true.
I
You
I
mentioned.
had my
Okay.
months of doing cold
Yeah,
calling.
you paid the price.
Yeah, exactly. I've done my I've paid my
Your
dues
fair share
of exactly my fair share
in
of
this
cold calling.
business and previous ones.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but you know, I think it's still very important because, uh, again, to go back to painting, like I never knew how to paint before. I'm not a great painter now, regardless, but I still force myself to go and do jobs myself or do them with my team so that I can learn what it is. And if they're telling us that, you know, it took me 10 hours to do this room when you know that it normally should take like 2 or 3, you're there to say, hey, I can paint this one in 2 or 3, and I'm not a master painter. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be, you know, doing it in around the same time. So same thing with the cold calling. It's like, you know, they're telling me, oh, you know, people are rude to me, people are yelling at me. I'm like, yeah, I know, I've dealt with that too, but you kind of have to, like, you know, give a bit of a spin to it, try to make it a little bit funny. Like, for example, when I spoke to the guy, it was literally yesterday. He's like, oh man, like I told you guys to stop calling me. I'm like, honestly, it wasn't us, but I can imagine you're getting called all the time about this property. Yeah, it's crazy, and you know, like there's no for sale sign. I'm like, I would be as frustrated as you. He's like, yeah, so like, you know, it's just, anyways. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate like he's telling me that, like, oh, okay, I appreciate like your understanding and this and that. So you know, you're able to turn it around. Um, but if you don't have that experience and that confidence, and then you have your staff that are telling you that are a little bit, you know, demotivated, what do you tell them? You know, if you haven't been through that yourself. Yeah.
I agree.
So I think it's a very, very important thing to, you know, it's like if you're gonna own a McDonald's, like you have had to flip burgers before, do the fries and do the cash and do everything. Doesn't mean you have to know everything.
Even the president did it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like it doesn't mean you have to do everything perfectly, but you have to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with rejection? And it's there's lots of it in this business, and you know, how do you keep going in a business that blows in your face all the time? And
It's not easy, and I'm not gonna say like, oh, I'm 100% positive 100% of the time. There's definitely days that are, you know, that are tough, that you thought that, you know, something was super guaranteed home run, and in the end it falls through, you know. So there's not really a magic wand or something, you know, that you can do to make it better. It's just have to keep on going, and I just keep on telling myself it's a numbers game, and that if this one doesn't work, the next one's gonna work. And I just read, and I'm pretty sure you have probably a while ago, Atomic Habits. Great book, fantastic book.
yeah.
And it really stood out to me where, you know, he's talking about, I think he has a chapter on that, like how to keep going if, you know, things are not going right or you're hitting failures or whatnot. And he just said, really focus on your systems and not the end goal, right? Because if you just focus on the end goal and you don't get it right now, then it's very easy to get, you know, demoralized. But if you just focus on your system and you try to perfect your system and you trust it, you know that you're going to get to your goal eventually, you know? So I think that's important. I have to implement that a little bit more.
And I guess you also have a vision that keeps you going. What's your vision for the next 5-10 years? Is it to grow this business or to use it as a
A stepping stone.
plongeoir?
Yeah.
How do you call that?
Diving board.
A diving board,
Yeah.
yeah, to something else.
I mean, eventually I would like to get more into I would like to start building some sort of equity somehow, because it's a very high cash flow, low equity business. Well, it's actually a zero equity business, right? Because
Meaning, if you stop tomorrow, there's nothing.
there's no cash that comes in.
Okay.
Exactly. So I would, you know, obviously cash flow is nice, but like you said, you have to keep working for it to come in. So I would eventually like to start getting into, you know, either there's all different types of rentals that you can do over there. They have like Section 8 rentals or just, you know, multifamily or whatnot. So I would eventually like to start getting into assets that are really going to build up your
Cash
equity.
flowing assets.
Yeah,
Income properties. Yeah.
but I think and it's funny. I told you I was watching your podcast with Randall this morning, and he said something that was interesting because he was saying that at a certain point in his career, he was just climbing the mountain. So you can't really see the top, but you're just there. You have your head down. You're like, 1 foot at a time.
Trusting the process.
Exactly. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. I don't really see the summit right now, but I'm just trying to climb it, and hopefully we get to like a little a little pause at some point where it's like you can kind of take a breath in and be like, okay, now where do I want to go from here? But I think I'm just in the
I like your take on it. It inspires me. It makes me think a lot.
yeah.
Not worry about the next summit, just worry on the next step.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's interesting.
Because I know myself pretty well, and I kind of have like two stages in life. I have the stage where I have my head down and I'm just working and I'm just kind of pushing forward and not really thinking too much about the next step. But then I also know that I will get to a point that I stop pushing forward, that I kind of stand up straight and I look around and I'm like,
Reassess.
okay, exactly, reassess. So I'm not at that point right now. Now I'm just head down, pushing forward, trying to grow my, real estate wholesaling operation as much as I
Okay.
can. But I'm sure either this year or maybe next year, I'll get to a point where stand up straight and I look around and I'm like, okay, which direction do I want to take now?
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, that reflects in your work ethic. Like you don't ask yourself too many questions. When you're when you're in that zone, you just do. You stop
Exactly.
thinking. Like
Yeah.
you've made your plan and you just follow it.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Not to rethink everything all the time.
Yeah.
I tend to fall in that trap. And
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to fall into that trap, and not to say that I think I do, pretty often, but it's, you just have to make a conscious effort to, snap out of it. And like you said, trust the process and just keep on pushing forward.
we've touched on a lot of points. Anything any topic you think we should cover? Like we're so deep in the conversation, I forget about things like I would have liked to talk about, but maybe you have ideas.
I don't know. I think that other, fellow Montrealers or people that are interested in real estate should consider or look into wholesaling in the US. I'm like I said, I'm in a lot of those groups, and I'm starting to see more and more Canadians get into those groups.
And again, there's no way we can do that in Canada.
So
You have to find phone numbers yourself. That's the
exactly,
thing.
exactly.
Or buy lists.
Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're putting a property under contract and then you're flipping the contract, right? So that in itself you can do in Montreal, and I'm sure people, or in Canada, I'm sure people have done that. But it's the tools that you need to do it, on a consistent basis. That's what we don't have here. Which
But the fact that those tools are not available means that there's a lot less competition.
correct. Yeah.
Maybe there's an opportunity there.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
There's only technically you need to have your license with I forget, it's a 4-letter acronym. It's CRTC that gives it to you. That it's
That's
like a
to do what?
license to solicitate people over
Okay.
the phone. And you need to buy your license. It's a yearly license, and you need to buy it for every regional code.
Oh yeah.
And especially the moment you have employees doing calls for you,
Yeah.
like you can so to everybody out there, like keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Like if you have a call center and you don't have any licenses, you're liable to like
Huge
major fines
for sure.
even if it's your own purpose. You're not selling the service of cold calling. You're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
So there's that's the kind of barriers we have here in
exactly.
Canada. But again, where there's friction,
Yeah.
usually there's opportunity.
Exactly.
And maybe there's something to
Yeah.
explore
No,
here.
there may be an opportunity for that.
But like you're saying, in the States, you can buy access to databases.
Oh,
with
exactly.
everything,
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
information.
Yeah,
and-
you can, what's also very, very easy over there is that you can it's called buying a list, or even just downloading a list for free. So my whole first year I was only pulling lists for free. And what I mean is that you go onto certain websites, and it's kind of like an MLS that you put in property types, but you can also put in filters for the homeowners. So you can say whether they live in the state or out of the state, whether they're behind on their taxes or they're current on their taxes. How long ago they purchase the property? For how much did they purchase the property? Are they recently divorced? Is it a property that was inherited? So you can put in all these filters, obviously size, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, whatever you want, pool, anything that you want. And you basically, you filter down to a list, you download the list, and then that's basically the people that you're targeting. So I do that, for land as well. I go and I put, I want it to be within this city or this zip code, from X size, from this size to that size, having owned for X amount of years minimum. And then it gives you the whole data of all of the properties with the owner's names. They don't give you the phone numbers. And then what you do is you take that list, you put it into a software, and it basically shoots you back the possibilities of the owner's phone numbers and emails. You take that list, you put it into what's called the dialer, which is just a software that automatically dials those numbers, and the second somebody picks up, it connects you with them. So you're not there with your phone dialing manually, because that would take you forever, because we're talking about lists of 500 to 5,000 records, right? So a list of 500 or even 1,000 I can get through in one full day. So imagine reaching out to 1,000 people. You're gonna get maybe 5 that'll say that they're interested, right? And you really only need 1 to close the deal with, and you're pretty set for the month, I would say. Yeah.
And when you hire these VAs to multiply the number of calls you can make in a month, are you seeing this as an investment for the following years, or these VAs might not be with you the following year? So they can't be building that rapport that you're talking about to see you've closed the deal that was someone you talked to in 2023. Yeah. Are you expecting that VA to be making that call a year and a half from now with this person, or it's more a short-term thing that you're investing in?
No, I mean, I think that the VAs will be with me for as long as I'm in this business. I hired 2 solid ones, and
Are they Americans?
No, they're Filipinos.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Filipino culture is it's a very loyal culture. Yeah, it's a very hardworking. There's a bunch of Filipinos in Montreal, and you see how well they work, and most of them are very trustworthy. They're very honest. So, I think that they're pretty happy with the stability of it. But basically, whenever they speak to somebody, the second that at this moment, they're not the ones doing the sale, or in this case, the purchase. They're just doing the first touch point. So the second that they fall into somebody that's yeah, what's your offer? They ask just a few qualifying questions. Then they'll send me an email right away, and then I pick it up from there. So then I call the seller, and that's when I build the rapport. So 1 year down,
scouting.
Exactly. So then 1 year down the road, if we need to follow up, it's me that's going to do the follow up call, because he doesn't remember talking to my VA. He'll remember speaking to me. Yeah. But I think, I think, on a large scale, in order to really grow this business, I have to give that responsibility to my VAs so that they can build the rapport with the seller. Ideally, the seller doesn't know who I am. They know who my VA number 1 or VA number 2 is, right? But I think I'm still a little far away from that.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
I think it's the right direction, though.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's something we could apply to our cold calling structure.
Yeah.
Nice. What CRM do you use?
It's called Mojo Dialer.
Mojo Dialer.
Yeah. So
okay, so the whole CRM is the dialer.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's where you track all the information on,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
deals. And
yeah. So I don't think it was made specifically to be a CRM, but this was like the first software that I bought, and I didn't want to start spending a ton of money on different software. So it's mainly a dialer, but I also made it into somewhat of a CRM for me, and it's been working so far. So I just keep it as my CRM, and then I have a different software that does my texting, but it's a little bit manual because whatever, for example, let's say somebody responds by text, like not interested or it's already sold or whatever. Excuse me, I have to go to my CRM and then mark it over there. So they don't
Communicate.
yeah, they don't communicate together. Yeah, but it's all part of the learning process. Yeah. Hopefully I need to find a way to streamline it a little bit more this year, because if I want to start expanding to different areas and different cities, I'm going to have a lot of records now that we're reaching out to, and it's not going to be very efficient to keep on doing this manual process for them. Yeah.
And how did you find buyers initially?
So the way that I found my buyers was I did a reverse method. So I'll give you kind of like the standard method that people use. So normally what they'll do is, because in all these states that wholesaling is pretty popular, there's like massive Facebook groups for like real estate, investors, wholesalers, buyers, whatever it is. So what these people will do is they'll go in these groups and they'll just make a post saying like, who's buying in like XYZ postal code or territory or whatnot. And then you have like 50 people underneath like comment like, here's my email, here's my email, here's my email. So, there's obviously pros and cons to that. The pros is that you get a lot of feedback, but the cons are that you don't know if these people are legit, in the sense that there are some wholesalers that will pretend like they are the buyer so that you can sell them their deal, and then they try to resell your deal, basically. Right? So a lot of newbies get kind of trapped, like sucked into this trap, unfortunately. And then you'll have like other builders that are just starting, that don't really understand the market very well or don't know their numbers very well. So they'll say that they'll purchase it, and then the day of closing they back out. Like it's happened a lot, not to me, luckily, but it's happened to a lot of other people. So that's kind of like, you kind of just like, spray everywhere and then see kind of who bites back. So I do the opposite. So what I'll do is, whenever I see a property that like there's interest to sell it, I'll go on Zillow or Redfin, which is like their public MLS, and then I'll put the filters as recently sold in the past year, and then I can filter by the date of construction of the house. So I'll put like, let's say in the past year or 2 years. So if I see that this house 3 blocks over, which was built, let's say beginning 2024, sold 3 months ago, I'm going to do a research on who owned that house that was sold, which is 99% of the time a construction company. And then I do a reverse search that I'll find who owns the construction company, reach out to him and say, hey, I saw that you just built this house on this street. Are you still looking to buy in the area? Exactly.
Smart.
So in that case, first of all, I know that they're legit, that they're actually builders or buyers. Second of all, I know that they actually have the funds because they purchased this lot. So most of the time they will have the money to do that, because not a lot of the time, but you will find situations where like somebody pretends to be a buyer and then just doesn't have the money to close. So these are just kind of, proven facts that just support them being a real buyer. And they also know the market really well, right? Because they just built and sold something there. Yeah. So sometimes they may be willing to pay more, or sometimes they're going to tell you something about that market or about that lot, or if there's a homeowner association that you wouldn't, or a regular buyer wouldn't know, and that you might only find out at the last minute. That's happened. It's happened to me a few times where they're like, this is a neighborhood where you can't build this type of house, or you have to build this type of house. So if I was to sell that to just a random buyer, he might only figure that out a week before the closing, or a few days before the closing, or he might only tell me that the day of closing, saying like, oh, I need like a 50K reduction or something like that. So that's kind of how I find my buyers. Is I do the reverse method. I see who built and sold, and then I reach out to them directly, as opposed to having people come to me. I go to them. Yeah, and
Very clever.
I have two main guys that I work with. That's how I found them, was by doing this reverse method. I found them at the beginning when I had just started, like middle 2023, and they were, the only two guys that gave me the time of day, because you have to realize that, these builders, just like the sellers, they get reached out to all the time from new wholesalers saying like, what's your buy box? What are you looking for? This and that. And then 90% of these guys, these wholesalers, will never send them a deal. So they just feel like they're wasting their time, right? But these two guys really gave me the time of day. I asked them a bunch of questions at the beginning before I even sent them anything. And it took me months before I closed the deal with the first one. So, and during those months, like, we were in constant communication. I was sending them lots all the time. They were saying, this one's good, this one's bad. This is why. Look at the zoning, look at this, look at that. So they taught me a lot of what I learned, and they were very honest with me. They were very truthful. So, and I still do business with them today. So their investment in me, if you will, at the beginning paid off, because I sent both of them basically the bulk of my deals.
That's a fun way to do business.
Yeah. And I like the fact that I can establish that relationship with them, so, because because with sellers, you don't have that relationship, because after the transaction is done, it's done with that seller. So you can put a lot of time and effort into nurturing that relationship, if you will, with the seller. But once they get their money and the title is transferred, then you don't ever hear from them again. And but at least with the buyers, I have that continuous relationship.
Do you keep contact with the sellers?
No, I don't.
You should.
Yeah, I should.
There's like probably a private loan business you could set up, like recycle these relationships. Like, you've built trust with someone, so there's ways you can keep doing business.
It's cool, because I was watching a podcast a few days ago of people that are in the land business too, but that are at a much higher scale. And they have different divisions in their company. So they have like the land flipping business. They have like their realtors kind of division, and they also have a lending division too, or like an investment
Arm.
arm, if you will. So whenever they close a deal with somebody, so let's say, you just paid somebody $100,000 for their piece of land, they'll call them back up a few days later saying like, hey, like,
Do you want to loan that $100,000?
like, what are you planning to do with your $100,000? Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I have this opportunity that, you can get whatever, 4%, 5% back of your money in the next year. Oh, okay, great. Here's my 100,000.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind.
Yeah.
And SEC rules are different to the Canadian securities regulations, but I'm pretty sure there's things you can do like perfectly legally.
Yeah.
And you just need to have the right structure, and private money is a great business too.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing about, real estate in the US is that there's so much opportunity in terms of different avenues, different paths you can take, which is beautiful. But at the same time, the downfall of that is that your eyes are just looking at every...
You need to stay focused.
Exactly. You need to stay focused, because, again, I might see like somebody saying, I made this loan or whatever, and I made like X amount of return, and you're like, wow, that's a ton of money. Maybe I should do that. And then some other guys like, well, I bought something and I split it up and I listed it. It's like, okay, maybe I should go do that.
Well, the idea here is not to split your focus.
No.
But to
Just
recycle
to
all the byproducts of your operation. So if the byproduct is a bunch of relationships that are solid and based on trust with people with money, it's just a phone call away at this point. You're not setting up a whole operation for prospecting and everything. You just already have that network. So it's just leveraging those relationships all the way till the end and making it profit to them.
Yeah,
These people are probably going to not know what to do with this money.
Oh, 100%.
Kind of wasted.
That's it, exactly. So if you can,
if you
make
can
it
provide
work for
them a return and make money for them, they're going to be forever grateful.
Yeah, 100%. It's yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind down the road. But I think right now I'm just, like I said, I'm climbing that mountain. I have my head down and just trying to do what's been working so far.
Well, keep climbing, and I won't take more of your time.
It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you. I have a very last question for you.
Uh-huh.
It's the billboard question.
Okay.
If you could write something on a metaphorical billboard, something that everybody on planet Earth would see driving down the road, what would you write on it? Call me, I have land, or
you mean some sort of like advice or
life advice, or something you'd share with everyone?
Yeah, I think my favorite quote, and it's terrible that I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of the man who believes he can and the man who believes that he can't are both normally right. And I've kind of held that in my mind from a very early, like when I started boxing even, because it's most of the time, if you believe that you can, you'll find a way to do it. And if you believe that you can't, you most likely won't do it. You won't take the time and energy and effort to evaluate certain paths, because subconsciously you're like, it can't be done.
Yeah.
So I think that, a large portion of your success really depends on if you believe that you can achieve what you want to, what you set out to achieve.
Does it happen to you sometimes not to believe that you can't?
Yeah, all the time.
And what do you do in those moments?
I don't know, you just have to kind of trust the process, and you almost have to like ignore yourself sometimes. I think, because especially for me, I think that I could my thoughts can get in the way of myself, right?
I think it's the same. It's the case for most people.
Yeah. So at that point, you kind of just have to, realize what's happening, acknowledge what's going on, know that it's normal. And I think
catch yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Believing you can't.
Exactly.
And just letting it go.
But I think really with maturity and experience and time and failure is also, it'll just teach you like, okay, this is the path to go. It's normal that you're thinking this way. Everybody goes through this, even you. But just kind of keep on pushing, and it'll come. It'll come. You have to kind of create your own luck.
Well, I hope you believe you can, because I know you can. I know you well enough, and
thank you.
You're a strong guy with a great work ethic, and you're also a very trustworthy person. And I'm sure it just passes through the text you send, and people can feel that, and that's probably why you have success. Because I think I would do business with you any day.
I appreciate that.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was really fun.
And I want to try something. I'd like to have like people calling someone to come on the podcast. You know? Drop a name. If you think someone should come on this podcast,
definitely Nick.
So let it be Nick then.
Nick has got to come on this podcast.
Shout out to Nick.
Nick, I'm talking to you. You need to show up on this podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be very happy to have Nick on the podcast.
I'll have a talk with him when I see him in Charlotte.
Sounds cool.
And hopefully we see you there too.
I'd love to come.
Yeah.
So another great conversation ends. I hope it brought you tremendous value. If it did, please like, subscribe, or leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. We'd love to read your comments. Feel free to leave one. And also you can contact our guests. Usually their information is included in the description. So that's it. That's all. See you very soon, my friends.